I just think this narrative that AI is going to destroy higher education is such ridiculous bullshit. I believe that college higher education, if it's reasonable and you get into a decent school and you're cut out for it, is still kind of the ultimate complement to your life. One, you're going to learn a lot. Even if it's how to use AI or not use AI or how to write thoughtful prompts. Two, you rise or fall to the level of your peers, and college kind of scoops off the highest level gene pool foam. Do you have an opportunity to go into the trades instead of taking out student debt and you just don't enjoy school? Yeah, that's a decision that you should be thoughtful about. But the notion somehow that school has been disrupted by AI, give me a fucking break. In today's office hours, we talk about raising boys, whether college still makes sense in an AI economy, and relationships. Question number 1. Our first question comes from Left Investment 1759 on Reddit. They say, "Hello, I'm hosting a book club later this month featuring notes on being a man. We are a group of working married moms with kids living in the illusion of protection from the state in the suburbs of Minnesota. The majority of us have sons in elementary school. I pitched your book as, let's use Scott's lens to think about how we're raising our boys and what we should be paying attention to as our children eventually choose partners. If you were facilitating this discussion with our group, what would you want to hear from us? Or what question do you wish more moms asked after reading it?" Phew. It's funny. It's like the questions you should expect are the hardest ones to answer. What do I want moms to think about? Well, one, so my mind immediately goes to the following. Some of the differences between boys and girls. If you were to reverse engineer when a man or a boy comes off the tracks to one single point of failure, it's when he loses a male role model. We have more single-parent homes now than any nation in the world. And depending on which survey you look at, it's either 82 or 88% are headed by a woman. And what happens with girls in single-parent households is while they might be more likely to be depressed, they oftentimes are more promiscuous because they're looking for attention, male attention in the wrong places. They have similar outcomes on educational attainment, on future income, on actual suicide. So you could argue that they actually do okay. It's an entirely different experience with boys. The moment a boy loses a male role model through death, abandonment, or divorce, at that moment, he becomes more likely to be incarcerated than to graduate from college. He becomes twice as likely to kill himself, twice as likely to be a substance abuser. So it ends up that boys, while being physically stronger, are neurologically and emotionally much weaker and much more susceptible to the absence of a male role model. My advice is more for single mothers, and that is make sure that you have males involved in the boy's life. And even saying that 5 years ago was, well, what, Scott? Women can't raise good men? Yeah, of course they can. I was raised by a single immigrant mother, lived and died as secretary. My dad wasn't very involved in my life. But it's really important that, one, you have men involved in the young man's life. What else would I suggest? I mean, dumb stuff. I try to roughhouse with my boys. I try early on to set up guardrails. This is more parenting advice. I love what First Lady Obama said. You've got to be an asshole now such that there are not assholes later. What I have found as a parent, this is probably more advice for the man, I thought that being a dad would be a series of Hallmark commercials where I did something and I got more love back. And what I've realized is that being a dad, or I guess just being a parent, means quite frankly just giving a shit ton more than you get back. It took me a few years to learn that this wasn't about me, about rewarding moments where my kids decide that they love the Los Angeles Rams because I did, or send me a nice note. No, I mean, there's some of that. Also, and this is more advice for dads than moms, I think the best thing you can do for sons is to try and be really respectful, kind, and affectionate to the mother, even if you're getting divorced, because I think a lot of my shortcomings in terms of how I approach relationships or the way I acquitted myself with women as a young man was I don't think I had a great role model in terms of how you treat relationships from my father. So I think it's especially important that the parents try to be really kind to each other. If you do end up in a situation where you end up splitting with your husband, try and make sure that there are men and do everything you can to make sure that the dad can stay involved in the son's life. I think sports and chores and I have this practice called what a man does. But more than anything, the thing I would want to say to mothers is forgive yourself and to recognize that a boy's prefrontal cortex is 18 months behind a girl's. Sometimes they don't do well in school. Sometimes they roughhouse. They can be totally self-absorbed, inconsiderate. Your noise, they begin literally drowning out. Like there's studies showing that their mom's voice starts to sound like that Gary Larson cartoon where it's just blah, blah, blah. So if you're having a difficult time or don't have the relationship with your son you thought you were going to have, realize that they do come back to you. When I was in 11th and 12th grade, I wasn't mean to my mom, but I wasn't very kind and we weren't getting along. And that's a natural instinct because it's time for them to leave the pack. So quite frankly, they start acting like assholes, which makes it easier for both of you to separate. But within a couple years, I was at UCLA and I was coming home once, twice a week to have dinner with my mom. And, I couldn't, nothing cemented, nothing good happened to me unless I called my mom and told her about it. Oh, I got a B, which was good for me in biology. Oh, that's great. A B is great. Oh, I got a job interview with Morgan Stanley. That's fantastic. Tell me about it. And now still, good things sort of happen to me, but they don't really, because my first inclination is to call my mom and boast and have her cement it. This is all a long-winded way of saying the investment you're making now, the frustration, sometimes the lack or the unrequited affection, effort, and love, trust me on this, it comes back to you. The relationship, I especially think, between a single mother and her son, I just think it's singular. It's the defining relationship in my life. I'm friends with a lot of men who were raised by single mothers, and there's the rest of the world, and there's our mother. Full stop. That's it. We may not even like each other, but this is what we protect at all costs, is our mother. So if you're spending a lot of time on effort that you don't feel is rewarded raising your son, if you don't feel like you're getting nearly the love or regard back that you're investing, just trust me on this. He comes back to you. Question number 2 comes from Christian Robin on LinkedIn. They ask, in a world where AI makes knowledge and skills basically free, what's the real value proposition of higher education now? I just think this narrative that AI is going to destroy higher education is such ridiculous bullshit. I believe that college, higher education, if it's reasonable and you get into a decent school and you're cut out for it, is still kind of the ultimate complement to your life. One, you're going to learn a lot, even if it's how to use AI or not use AI or how to write thoughtful prompts. Two, you rise or fall to the level of your peers, and college kind of scoops off the highest level gene pool foam. And that is athletes who manage to study, who manage to be able to work in groups, who don't have mental illness, who maybe have matured at a decent rate, quite frankly, who come from wealthy families oftentimes, and it's sad to say, but oftentimes they're better prepared for the world. A lot of my friends were wealthy at UCLA, and I benefited from that. It was aspirational, and they had contacts. If that sounds unfair, yeah, it is. It's called capitalism. At the same time, capitalism reinvests in people who don't have access. So I got Pell Grants, which helped me get through college. We don't educate kids. We certify them. We say, okay, if you get through 4 years at the University of North Carolina, you have decent EQ, you can look people in the eyes, you know how to study, you know how to connect effort with success, you have basic understandings of the key principles of reading and arithmetic, you can get along with others, and you get exposed to different domains. The classics help you understand investment banking. Psychology helps you understand technology and how people behave in investor relations. All these things, you want to damage the muscle in between your ears such that it comes back stronger. And by the way, there's absolutely no evidence that the delta between the life you'll likely lead if you're fortunate enough to get higher education versus the life you'll lead if you don't is still dramatic. College graduates earn about 66% more per week on average than high school graduates. Median weekly earnings are roughly $1,500 for bachelor grads versus $900 for high school-only workers. Unemployment is also about half as high. It's around 2.2% for bachelor grads versus just over 4% for high school grads. The trade-offs are becoming harder, I'll acknowledge, for some, and that is people say, should I go to college? It's situational. If you get ARB down to a shitty school with a Mercedes price and you're going to have to take out a ton of debt, and maybe you have an opportunity to go work for your uncle in his vocational company and start at $70,000 or $80,000 a year because you have skills, that's a real question that you need to ask other people about. You get into Yale, go. You get into a good school, maybe not an amazing school, but you can afford it, go. But it's no longer a no-brainer. When I got into UCLA, it was a no-brainer. It was free. I could figure out a way. I showed up to UCLA with, I think, $2,300. I showed up to Berkeley Graduate School with $60 in a 1984 Honda Accord, which is awesome. And I was able to get through with a minimal amount of student debt because the value proposition was incredible. Unfortunately, It's not that school isn't as valuable now. It's just that it's not the same value because the corrupt cartel known as higher education has raised the cost of tuition faster than inflation, created artificial scarcity such that young people are forced to take out debt, which, by the way, is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So there is a mendacious fuck part of higher ed. But on the whole, this year, you don't need higher education? Apps are up. They're mostly up across the big state schools, see above value, and two in the South because people don't want to see a Palestinian flag when they show up for orientation. So the complexion of which schools, Vanderbilt and Duke are going to have lower admissions rates this year than Harvard. Schools including UVA, UNC, Tulane are now more difficult to get into than many of the Ivy Leagues. Do you have an opportunity to go into the trades instead of taking out student debt and you just don't enjoy school? Yeah, that's a decision that you should be thoughtful about. But the notion somehow that school has been disrupted by AI, give me a fucking break. Someone who tells me that, their kid doesn't need college, that maybe they'll be the next Zuckerberg, or with AI, they don't need college. I'm looking at someone whose son just got a 22 on the ACT and they're trying to make themselves feel better when they realize their kid may not be cut out for college. Okay, fine. The key isn't making college more valuable to people. It's making it a better value. And that is expanding the aperture, the throttle, in terms of access and lowering the cost. That's what we should be talking about, not whether AI is going to change education. And just to wrap up here on my rant, the head of Dartmouth, I was at the Atlantic Festival, and the president of Dartmouth was talking about AI in education. Fuck that. Here's an idea. You got an $8 billion endowment. You let in 1,100 freshmen. You're in the middle of fucking nowhere. Let in 11,000 and stop all this mental masturbation and distraction around AI. Here's an idea. Just let in more kids. We'll be right back after a quick break. Support for Prof G comes from AMP. AMP is a sleek, minimalist home fitness device you actually want in your house. That means no cables, no clutter, no nonsense. You just walk up, turn one smart dial, and you're working out in under 15 seconds. And full disclosure, I love this piece of exercise equipment. This thing you just put on your iPhone, I put in my headphones, and it tells me exactly what to do, and it uses AI to figure out what I need to do more of, less of. It even knows when I need to stretch. I love this thing, and for those of you who listen, I very rarely give shout-outs like this. The biggest challenge in fitness is consistency, showing up and making it a part of your routine, and AMP removes that friction. Strength, mobility, yoga, it's all there. If you're trying to build a routine that sticks, AMP makes it easy to stay on track, especially if you've got a packed schedule. Check it out at joinamp.com. That's joinamp, joinamp.com. Welcome back onto our final question, which comes from D.H. Norberg on Instagram. What are the early indicators for success in a long-term relationship and red flags? Oh, my friend, if I knew this. I'm a serial monogamist, and that is I'm usually in long-term relationships, but I've been in a bunch of them. And everybody has their thing, right? And by the way, I wasn't drawn to somebody. I've never been drawn to women because I looked and thought, wow, I'd really like lower rates on health insurance, or this person would be a good mother. The reason I entered into relationships and approached women is for one reason. I thought I would really like to have sex with this person. Now, what is that attraction? For me, one of the things I've always been drawn to women physically and sexually who are really, quote unquote, professionally impressive women. Not all guys are like that. My most serious relationship before my current one was with a surgeon. My current relationship is with someone who went to graduate school, worked at Goldman Sachs for 5 years. That turns me on. So being just really drawn to somebody is kind of table stakes, right? You just think, I would really like to kiss this person and hang out with them. In terms of red flags, the relationships that haven't worked out for me, where I should have seen red flags was, I think a person's friend group is really just a fantastic indicator. The person you're with is a mashup of their friends. Are they social? Do they have a lot of friends? What is the caliber of their friends in terms of kindness and success? Another thing I would look at if you're dating in terms of, especially with men, do they get along with their mother and their parents? I think the way a man treats his mother is a pretty good indication of how he's going to treat you and how he feels about women to begin with. Also, how they speak about their former relationships. It's a real red flag for me when I would date someone and they would immediately start shit posting and saying what a horrible person their boyfriend was. Like, so which is it? You have terrible judgment or you're the terrible person in the relationship? That's a red flag. And then there's the substance stuff. I have been really into women and noticed that they constantly disappear and go to the bathroom. And then I found out they were doing drugs and I just sort of ignored it for a while. So substance abuse, this is going to sound sexist. I've been out with some women who I think were very focused on just getting to a place of where they could have a bunch of material items as opposed to thinking about building a life with someone or kids. Is that fair? Yeah, I think it is. And then the ultimate kind of litmus test is when I was growing up and dating women, I would try and figure out what I thought they wanted and be that person. Like I thought, I don't want to tell this person I really like them because then I come across as weak, or I'm going to constantly boast and exaggerate my accomplishments because I think they want somebody who's impressive or rich. The ultimate litmus test for someone you want to settle with is someone you can kind of just be yourself around and who just really likes you, who just thinks you're great because of exactly who you are. And that's just spending time with them. And also probably the best litmus test is see if you can travel with someone nonstop for 2 weeks. And if you don't want to kill each other by the time you get home, that's probably someone you should marry. So to just try and break it down, what makes for a good partnership? I distill it down to 3 things. The first is sex and affection. It says, I choose you. Young people are usually pretty good at figuring that out. 2, values. I think it's important to have conversations around where do you want to live? Does she want to live in the city, but you want to move back to the farm? What is the role religion is going to play in your life? All that stuff. You don't have to get along politically, but you have to be able to have a conversation around these things. And then the third thing that people don't talk about is money. What's your approach to money, to earning it, to spending it? I have friends in my life where the dude uses money for control and the female, and this sounds sexist, and it is sexist, but it's true, and the female feels like it's a game to spend as much money as possible. And they don't partner, they don't align on economics. And the number one source of divorce isn't a lack of shared values or infidelity, it's economic strain. So truing up and getting alignment around economics is really important. That's all for this episode. If you'd like to submit a question, please email a voice recording to officehours@profgmedia.com. Again, that's officehours@profgmedia.com. Or if you prefer to ask on Reddit, just post your question on the Scott Galloway subreddit and we might feature it in an upcoming episode.